All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us as we close out day 2 of HEDNA. I know we're the last thing standing between you and happy hour, so we'll try to make this more engaging than the Aperol spritzes on your mind. I'm excited to be here today alongside my industry colleagues to talk through what might represent one of the most significant shifts in our professional lifetimes. Those 2 topics primarily are, 1, the rise and predominance of remote/hybrid work, and 2, the changing intergenerational dynamics and how we all successfully work together in this new environment, especially as boomers retire and Gen X and millennials move into these leadership roles. Before I introduce you to our lovely panelists, I want to introduce one more participant who will be helping us define the generations we'll be referring to today. You've actually heard their name quite often throughout sessions, so I'm curious, before today, how many of you are familiar with ChatGPT? All right, okay, almost that's like a whole room. That's great. Well, for those of you unfamiliar, ChatGPT is an AI chatbot that is conversational in nature, and it's definitely all the buzz right now, so we thought, why not, with a bunch of millennials on the panel and Gen X on the panel, include it for a question. So let's give this a try. Hey, ChatGPT, what are the current living generations active in the workplace, and how are they defined?
The current living generations active in the workplace are baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964. Baby boomers are currently nearing retirement or already retired. They have experienced significant changes in technology and the workplace throughout their careers. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980. Generation X is currently in their 40s to 50s. They grew up during a time of economic and social transitions, witnessing the rise of technology and globalization. Millennials or Generation Y, born between 1981 and 1996. Millennials are currently in their 20s to late 30s. They are known for growing up with technology and experiencing the transition to a more digital and interconnected world. Generation Z or Zoomers, born between 1997 and 2012. Generation Z is currently in their late teens to early 20s. They are the first generation to have grown up entirely in the digital age, with social media and smartphones playing a significant role in their lives. It's important to note that generational definitions can vary slightly depending on different sources, and the exact date ranges used to define each generation may differ. These definitions are a general guideline based on common demographic research.
Wow, I don't know about you guys, but if I had that in university, I'd probably be a doctor instead of sitting here. All kidding aside, I think it's important to think through the fact that, speaking of intergenerational dynamics, there are probably millennials and Gen Zs on your team who are using this to relieve themselves of mundane tasks. So keep that in mind. But moving on to our lovely human panelists, maybe could we go around and briefly introduce yourself, what generation you identify as, and then whether you work in an office, remotely, or are hybrid. Oh, and lastly, if you have a preference for any one of those. Maybe Mercedes, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mercedes Blanco, based in Miami, and I've been remote since 2008. So I think that I've seen it all, before, during, and after COVID, and I have to say that I miss the pre-COVID days of being remote without that many Zoom calls, although still my preference is being remote. But I think that it's important to keep some sort of an in-person component, whether if it's at conference like this one, like HEDNA, or in our office with our colleagues. So I think that I've answered all of your questions, haven't I?
I think so, yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia Petropoulou, and I work at CloudBids looking after distribution partnerships. I'm remote as well. I've been remote since COVID, so a bit more recent, but I really enjoy remote work. For me, it's really, really important, and actually when I was changing careers, I was looking for that flexibility, and I don't think I would have accepted a position that was fully back in the office all the time. So I guess maybe it's linked to my generation. I would say I'm between millennial and Gen Z, like on the border. We can call me Gen Z, so maybe that's why.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Cabreza. I work with XanderPay. It's a startup in the payments space here. I had been with Hilton for, I think, 16 or 17 years before that. Made the transition during COVID. I'm based in London. I'm now based out of my home. Obviously, when I was at Hilton, we had a large office in just North London, where I was based predominantly, although did a bit of working from home then. I know at the time Hilton was wondering, should we or should we not allow home working? And we're in the middle of that decision when COVID hit, and it was obviously mandated for everyone. Do I prefer it? I do like the flexibility, and I think most people do. Do I miss being in an office? In some ways, but not totally. I would not want to ever be 100% in the office.
Nice, thank you all. I think there's a stereotype that there's a generational component to what certain age groups prefer to work from home versus work in office. I'm curious, Nadia, as our youngest panelist, teetering on Gen Z, what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's a yes and no answer. I think at the same time, obviously, if we stereotype a bit and look at the different generations, the older generations are used to, working from the office, and that's how their mentality around work is, because they've been doing it for many, many years. The young generation, especially the youngest one now, they even went to university remote. They're very comfortable with using technology, so they would probably lean towards that. And the millennials, I guess, are notorious for wanting flexibility, so they must sit around the middle there. But I think in reality, it has a lot to do with people's personal circumstances. I think that's what it comes down to. And whether that's you want to work a bit from your home country, like myself, or you have caring responsibilities, and that could be children, that could be somebody's ill in your family that you want to take care of. There's all those kinds of things. And I guess going back to also diversity, equity, and inclusion, I know Hedna is a big champion of that cause as well. There is a lot there that benefits, remote work. And I have a friend of mine, for instance, who's in a wheelchair, and she was having a lot of trouble, especially with a London commute. That's very, very tough anyway, to find, to have jobs where she comes into the office and commutes every single morning. So remote work really took that stress away for her, and it was a great experience. So I think it leans a lot on personal circumstances for people and what they prefer.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing. With that stereotype that younger cohorts are maybe seemingly more resistant to heading back to the office, is there a way to maybe meet in the middle? I know, Mercedes, you manage a large team of people born in the 90s and 2000s, so I'm kind of curious to get your perspective of what onboarding and managing that has been like.
Yeah, so my company is headquartered in Barcelona, although we were founded in the States, and the majority of our teams before COVID, they were based in Barcelona, but nowadays even our hiring process has changed. And it is true, I'm one of the oldest, and I am an early millennial myself from the 80s. So you can imagine having people that they have no idea what, I remember I was making a joke about Kodak, and they had no idea what that was about. So I was like, okay, I get it now, and don't even let me start with musical taste. But I think that for them, flexibility is really important. I think that we have given them a lot of things from the new world. Like, for instance, around summer, in the United States, we have like summer Fridays. In our case, in our office, we have choose whatever you want to work from summer. So that's amazing. So for 3 months, you can work from wherever you want. It doesn't matter if you have like any personal situation or just because you want to. And I think that giving them the empowerment and making them feel listened, valued, and appreciated is key. I think that younger generations, they need to find value into everything that they do, and giving them a mission and making them feel part of something, of building something, it's what is key. Otherwise, we will lose that, because their motivation is no longer a salary. Of course, we all work for a living, but for them, there are other components that are equally, if not most important, like being able to choose where to work from. Obviously, we do need to encourage them to participate at different things, and I don't know if we are a reflection of the new world, but I'll give you a number. We are 180 employees worldwide, more or less, and in our office in Barcelona, we have 40 different nationalities. So I think that that gives us a mix of different cultures, and also we are a majority women. And for being a technological-based company, that's also even more impressive. So I think that we have not only younger folks, we have more female, and we have a lot of cultural differences which add a lot into the conversation. So it's very important to identify the needs, the motivation. We have an HR team that is fully dedicated into finding those gaps. We have implementing, like we were talking before about AI, sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis is something that we take very seriously internally at our company, and we implement changes accordingly. We do a lot of different initiatives for in-person things as well, but we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you highlight a really important point. I think Brian Chesky was quoted as saying that, people need to realize the best talent isn't in San Francisco, London, and New York anymore. And to the extent that you can contribute to your DEI initiatives, you can find amazing talent everywhere. And certainly that's more diverse than just what is represented in the city centers. Yeah. And Nadia, switching to you, given that you work at a tech-oriented company in a partnerships role, when I was at Hotel Tonight, I joined when we were like 30 people, and I was on the sales team as a market manager, and so we'd have to cold call like 100 hotels a day, and there was something energizing about being alongside people who had to suffer through that as well, right? Be encouraging when you got ultimately hung up on, celebrate wins. So I can imagine that a sales role would be helpful to be around a team, I think there's a misconception that certain roles need to be in the office versus work from home. Do you have a strong opinion on, these roles should actually probably meet more in person and be in the office, or could actually succeed in a work from home role?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I agree with you. I mean, gun to my head, if I had to pick like one business unit that that would benefit, I think sales is a good one, because the people feed off each other's energy and the competition. So I think that one makes sense. But I think broadly we all benefit, right? And that's why we're in this conference to begin with, to make those person face-to-face interactions. And then that makes the online interaction that we then have when we take those conversations away more meaningful, because we build that trust and we know those people. So I think that definitely helps. But overall, it comes down to like a company having a very strong culture, either way, picking a very specific direction. And I know with Cloudbeds, and our CEO talks about this a lot, there's this concept of remote parity, which is a different kind of parity. It's like the idea of FOMO and creating, fear of missing out with people. So that's very important, when you have especially a hybrid environment or whatever environment, to make sure you don't exclude different categories of people. And I'll give you an example from my previous work, for instance, in consulting. It was the idea that the office was meant to be remote, so you could work from home, you could work from the office, whatever you wanted. But in reality, the culture didn't support that. So when you were at home, people would have meetings in the office, and they didn't include you, they didn't think to dial you in. So you're always feeling like you need to be in the office, you're missing out. So as long as you can kind of have a good culture around it, then everybody, it can work well fully remote, it can work well hybrid or whatever it is, but the company needs to take a stance and like make sure that's followed in practice.
Yeah, building off of that, David, I'm curious to get your perspective on this next question as our resident Gen Xer on the panel. Elon Musk recently said that remote work is morally wrong and that the laptop class is living in la la land. They're asking everyone else not to work from home while they do, and it's wrong. From your hotelier perspective, from a Gen X perspective, how do you feel about that question or that statement?
Well, I think it really depends, and it's impossible to generalize across an entire generation, across cultures, across different personalities. I think having made that leap from a large corporate entity to now working for a very small startup, where we have I don't know if he's in the room, I think he's in a meeting right now, a borderline boomer, a Gen Xer, a millennial, we're coming up on some Zoomers. I think it's important to understand that in order to make that work, you have to look at, well, in our case, we're all remote working, so it's not even a choice. But then it's looking at how do you make that work? How do you bridge the differences in age? Because there are definitely differences in the way that we approach things. There's also individual differences. how do you manage the communication? And especially when you've got people who are working remotely, you're relying on different types of communication. You don't have the same face-to-face communication. You don't have that ability to read cues from the way someone is responding to you. And so in our case, where we've got different time zones as well, it means that we've got communication where one email goes out or a Teams message goes out, and 8 hours later, someone else might get it, and they're not understanding everything that's behind it. And so making sure that you've not only built the type of culture within your company to manage that, but you've got the right communication policies and tools, and then also some ability to get those cues from each other as to what you mean. There have been numerous times in my own work where I just say things very directly because I'm kind of used to that. And I think sometimes they might come across to someone who is reading it 8 hours later and not understanding the zone that I was in at the time. It might come across a little different. So it's a really interesting balance when you've got all these different aspects of how do you manage a workforce that is across time zones and across generations.
Yeah.
And different teams as well, if I may add, because I remember when we started to go back to the office, all of our engineers, they were pissed. They didn't want to, because we sales marketers, we in this room, we tend to be loud. And they wanted to be home, just working, just programming something without any interference, right? And if you were in an office with people like hunters making calls every minute of the day, they didn't want that. And also there are companies like in tech, we tend to be more remote-based, but in a hotel, you cannot. You have to be present. So obviously, we have to take into consideration the nature of the business, the culture of the company, and the difference within the departments, within the generations, and within the cultures. And also, adding into communication, I think that writing is the one thing that can be so misunderstood. It's so easy to read it differently, in a different tone that it was meant to be said, that I think that we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, that brings a funny example to my mind. Working with a borderline Gen X boomer as a boss, as a millennial, I feel like we tend to be more expressive in our communications to get across tone. So whether that's adding an exclamation point or adding a smiley face emoji, whereas if I get a message from my boss on Slack saying, we need to talk, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Maybe add a smiley face next time, please. But building upon, making sure teams are set up for success in a remote environment, how do we develop new workforce entrants remotely? And how do you develop trust in these employees without direct supervision? Mercedes, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, given you've onboarded so many people in a remote environment, and then also anything else that the other panelists have to add.
Well, to me, there is something that is key. Onboarding, it has to be in person. The first days, the first weeks that someone is part of a company, they need to do that in person. Otherwise, it's going to take them forever to really understand and get immersed into the culture. And we have always seen much more success when we have done that onboarding at our office. It is not only about doing that in person. Me flying to San Francisco for some training is not the same as flying that person from San Francisco to our office, right? So I think that onboarding in person is key, at least 1-2 weeks. 1 minimum, 2 ideal in my own professional experience. And then I think that it's imperative, if you have a remote team, that from time to time, you gather them in person. Otherwise, you feel like you don't belong to anything. You feel like you are on your own. And that team building, that cohesiveness needs to happen in person. It doesn't matter if it's within a conference or if you are doing a regional meeting, something that my company always do. We do different things by teams, departments, and such, but every year between January or February, we bring everyone together from every department and every country in the world. And of course, that is expensive, but the benefits that come from it are so tangible that the ROI is there for us. And this year, it was fantastic because we choose our venue to be a cinema. And even the topic of the conference was the future of travel. And we even built a design with the logo of our company being like a movie. So I think that there is a lot of storytelling between or behind all of those things. So I would really suggest to keep a mix between the two. If that is not possible, because sometimes it is expensive, truth to be told. I remember just playing. I'm not a fan of games like doing 1 hour or 2 of scavenger games
The
or things like
icebreakers,
that.
yeah.
Okay, I don't. I mean, if I am working, I am working. If I am having fun, I'm having fun. Mixing the two, no. But I think that sometimes just like blending a little bit, just at the end of the day, we are human beings, and we want to be treated like human beings. So just listen to those human beings. It is important. Especially if they are on their homes every day of the year.
Yeah, I mean, as human beings, we strive for connection, right? David, I know I've Zoomed you a couple of times for work calls, and you and the XanderPay team are together on offsites. How do you guys keep the team together, given you're working across continents?
Well, it's an interesting one, and it's taken me a while to get used to, having not worked for a small startup. When my boss had first called me just to talk, I was kind of waiting for where's the request? What do you need? And it's just kind of chatting, and then I realized he does this every day, just to touch base and just to make sure that we're communicating, even when there is no urgent or even business talk around it. And so that's something which has been really interesting to me, and something that I probably need to develop more with the rest of my team is just communicating and building that relationship. Now, we do a lot of it. I mean, you guys will know 4 of us are here, and we take a lot of time to all be together in the same city because we're in different cities all over the world. Whenever there are things like HEDNA or other conferences or reasons to be together, we'll all then use that as our opportunity to be together. And I like that a lot because it means that we not only are there in person, but then we're doing something fun, and something a little different. It helps us to then go back to our day job and our home offices and then work more efficiently and smoothly together. I think the other thing that we utilize is, of course, different communication methods, as I think everyone here does, a blend of email and Teams and messaging and video conferencing. But yeah, the cues that go behind some of that communication, I'm still catching up with. I found it funny the first time I got an email with nothing but an emoji. I thought, that's the response, but it is one that we're getting through. And I know when companies talk about like mentoring, there's also a concept of reverse mentoring, and I know I definitely have a lot to learn from our younger team. Can help me learn about, it could be just the technology, some of that, or how to work with a different generation. So the learning definitely goes both ways. It's not top-down mentoring.
Yeah, no, totally. Nadia, I'm curious, from Cloudbed's perspective, being slightly larger, also a tech company, very much distributed, are there any things that you think they do well in terms of promoting culture when you're working remotely, or helping with communication along the way?
Yeah. And to your point, actually, just now about setting up a call, just to talk, I think that's really important, like having regular check-ins. And with Cloudbeds, like we're very mindful to do that, especially when it's somebody that's like a new joiner or, somebody that's more junior in their career and they need that additional guidance. They might, be a bit mindful. Everybody's busy, and you see the people kind of sitting on top of you as very, very busy people. So you might be a bit hesitant to put in, some time in their diary to talk without, a very set agenda of what you want to talk about and points to cover. And it's just creating that open space to raise any concerns or issues or just understand what's going on. I think that's very important. But with Cloudbeds, I guess, because we're about 1,000 people spread over 40 different countries, and it's all fully remote, we're being encouraged a lot to meet up with people. So you meet up people a lot in your own country, but people, by themselves organize a lot of social events and like fly into different countries, like in Europe or the States, to meet each other. So if one of my colleagues flies in to Europe from the States, then people, create Slack channels, and then suddenly like 10, 15 of us are flying into that same European country to meet, and we do a 3-day thing where we work remotely and we explore the country and we're tourists and we do all that together. So there's a lot of that going on, and that's purely, self-organized. People have their own initiative, but they really, want that human contact and meeting the person you've been talking to for months or years. So that's a very successful thing that we do, and I really enjoyed it. I was in Malaga a few months ago for this kind of event, for instance, and one just happened in Europe a couple of weeks ago.
Nice, very cool. And I heard you mention, setting up communication on Slack, because maybe there aren't those opportunities for those water cooler moments that we would have in a normal office. And one interesting application I saw recently at Uplift, we're around 250 people, but all around the globe, is this plugin called Donut, D-O-N-U-T, to Slack, where we set it up bi-weekly, so twice a month, to set time on your calendar with a random person at the company for 15 minutes, and it's a virtual coffee chat. And I got set up on my first one with our CTO, who I'd never interacted with. So it was a great opportunity just for us to learn like what I'm working on, what he's working on, and now it kind of broke the barrier for me to be not scared to Slack him if I have a question, obviously within good reason. But there are a lot of tools out there too that can help us in these environments. Our last question, as we have a few minutes left, and this is for anyone who wants to jump in, specifically for HEDNA, how does this impact the members and professionals in the audience when you think through, hoteliers, tech companies, consultants? Any thoughts there?
We need more people. We need more people in the room. We want this to be in person. I want this to be in person. I want to meet more and more and more of you. I think that it's imperative that we do so, because it's very easy for everyone in this room, myself included, to keep pushing on answering an email or doing a Zoom call, but the magic that happens in person, it only happens in person. And sometimes even you don't know what it can come up from a conversation if you don't start a conversation. So I remember when I started my career, I did so in events, actually. And they were always scared about virtual events. And I think that we should never be scared of that, because we all missed this during COVID. I think that we all saw the value of these things during COVID. We just need to be able to be a little bit more strategic or more thoughtful into how, when, and what to discuss when we are at those events, because the time that we are investing is so valuable that the more we deep dive into content that is valuable to all of us, the better. Like just before this, we were talking about AI in this round table. I loved it, but I felt that it was too short. And I know that, I don't know if there are a few of you that were in that call before, but I guarantee you that I am going to chase you because we want to continue that conversation because it was so fun. And that wouldn't have happened if we were not in a room together. I think that there are a lot of things that we could do together if we collaborate more, and collaboration happens in person.
Definitely.
I have one thought on that. I think we have never had this opportunity as an industry or as a world, really, to communicate with others all over the world so easily and readily. I think COVID really shortened that adoption cycle for this technology. And I think when working in the travel space, we are a global business. We work with global companies. We work with partners all over the world. There's immense resources in countries beyond our own borders, and it would be a shame, I think, for the industry to not take advantage of that, not really embrace it, and think, okay, we have the ability now to hire people from all over the world, create a very inclusive and diverse team, communicate with them, build that trust, build that camaraderie, and then serve a global industry. I think there's also then a very clear space for times like HEDNA and conferences, and the ability to then interact with all of these people together at once. So I think it's just an amazing opportunity. I hope that we're really ready to take advantage of that.
For sure. And given we're short on time, I didn't want to forget about our last panelist. So directing it to ChatGPT to close us out, can you please answer that last question for us about how this is relevant for HEDNA?
The impact of office presence on the hotel industry, hotel distribution, hotel technology providers, and consultants will largely depend on the specific roles and responsibilities of individuals within these organizations. Here are some potential impacts to consider. Hotels. The hotel industry may see a shift in the travel patterns of business travelers as more companies adopt remote work policies. This could impact the demand for hotel rooms, particularly in business travel hotspots. However, hotels may also benefit from the increased demand for remote workspaces and may be able to pivot their offerings to cater to this market. Hotel distribution. Hotel distribution companies may need to adapt their technology and services to better accommodate remote work arrangements. This could include offering more flexible booking options, virtual check-ins, and digital concierge services. Hotel technology providers. Hotel technology providers may see increased demand for technologies that facilitate remote collaboration and communication, such as video conferencing tools and project management software. Additionally, technology providers may need to develop new solutions to help hotels pivot their offerings to cater to the remote work market. Consultants may see increased demand for their services as hotels and other industry players seek to adapt to the changing needs of the market. This could include providing guidance on how to cater to remote workers, developing new strategies to attract business travelers, and helping companies navigate the challenges of hybrid work arrangements. Overall, the impact of office presence on the hotel industry and related industries will largely depend on how companies adapt to the changing needs of the market. Those that are able to innovate and provide flexible solutions that meet the needs of remote workers and hybrid work arrangements are likely to be well positioned for success in the coming years.
And with that, we thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists for your participation, and see you at the event tonight.